Good evening. Welcome to Charter Township of Van Buren Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, November 14th, 2018. We'll start with a roll call, please.
John Strangler is excused. Jeff Jarrett.
Here.
Donald Boynton.
Here.
Brian Kelly is excused. Medina Atkinson. Here. Sherry Budd.
Here.
Carol Thomas.
Here. Thank you very much. We have an agenda before us. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Commissioner Boynton, support.
Support.
Okay, Commissioner Atkinson, support. Any changes or additions to the agenda? All in favor of approving the agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the agenda is approved. We have minutes from the regular meeting of October 24th, 2018. Is there a motion to approve the October minutes?
Through the chair, make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Commissioner Budd, thank you. Support.
Support.
Commissioner Jar, any changes or corrections on the minutes? All in favor of approving the minutes for October 24th, 2018, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the minutes are approved. First item on tonight's agenda is Phase 2 final site plan approval for the applicant ACS Michigan Subaru Research and Development. They are requesting Phase 2 final site plan approval per the approved development agreement to construct an automotive research and development facility. The subject property is located at 50015 Michigan Avenue, otherwise known as the Harold Smith Farm. We'll start first with a presentation by the applicant.
My name's Gary Tressel with Hubbell Roth & Clark, a senior associate at the company. And on behalf of ACS, we're here to respond to any questions. I think that as everybody has probably seen, the project has started earth-moving operations. We're heavily into the final approvals at the Wayne County Drain Commission, and we have our MDOT permits and those types of things. If we are successful in having final site plan approval, we have some cleanup letters that I don't know if our response letters made your packages today or not. We got them late yesterday, and we wanted to respond that we're prepared to move forward with those conditions. And we'll move through the issued for construction documents so that we can get the final sign-offs from both Fishback and McKenna.
Excellent. Sounds good. I think we'll hear the recommendations from those two reviews and see if there are any questions or comments after that. Thank you. We'll start with McKenna first, please. Mr. Sloan.
Thank you. Just to recap, preliminary site plan approval was granted at the September 26, 2018 Planning Commission meeting, subject to several conditions. And in our letter of November 9th, what we've done is we've gone through those conditions and just added comments based on their revised plans. In most cases, there has been progress made on most of those conditions, and some of the other ones we can review administratively if that's the Planning Commission's recommendation. The first item that we have is the delineation with pavement striping lanes for ingress and egress off Michigan Avenue. There's a note on one of the sheets for the pavement markings, but the information wasn't shown on the sheets. So there's a barely visible arrow on a couple of the sheets, but those just have to be cleaned up and those arrows have to be added to the sheets. It's a minor item. It's basically pavement striping, but we would like that on the sheet for the final submittal. And again, that can be done administratively. There's nothing substantive about the plan that would change. The second condition was that the details of the proposed cantilever gate at the main access drive be included, including its operation. And this is a condition that can be met. We had just asked for clarification on the proposed fence. The ordinance does allow for a decorative stockade type of fence, and the metal fence that's presented on the plan can achieve that criteria in the zoning ordinance. But the plans had referred to a screened fence, and it was unclear on one of the sheets if that included that solid metal fence. I think in the applicant's response that solid metal fence was the screened fence, so that answers the question that we had in our letter under number 2. Under number 3, details of proposed signage must be included, and this is a condition that can be met. The applicant has stated that they'll include the signage after site plan approval. Signage is something that's administratively approved. They just go to the township and get a permit for it. This is something that we often like to see on a site plan just to make sure that it can comply with the zoning ordinance. In this case, we're satisfied with allowing it as an administrative condition, as long as they're aware of the sign regulations, which they have acknowledged. The fourth item is the installation of a sidewalk along the site's Michigan Avenue frontage. This is also a condition that can be met. The zoning ordinance requires that a sidewalk be included along the frontage of any major street. And the applicant has offered to have something of the form of a development agreement that could affect the paving of a sidewalk along the Michigan Avenue frontage if the township had sidewalk to the adjacent lot to the east. So if the township were to put in a sidewalk, then the applicant would be willing to build the sidewalk on their frontage as well. Under those circumstances, we would recommend that the requirement for the sidewalk can be met if there's a development agreement acceptable to the township attorney that would require the applicant to pave their frontage if the township paves the sidewalk along its frontage to the east. So these are items that we believe can be handled in a development agreement to affect the timing of any sidewalk along Michigan Avenue. The fifth item was a notation that all the test vehicles in the east parking area must be fully operable and not junk or dismantled. This condition has been met on the plans. The sixth item was that the detail of the roof-mounted mechanical equipment screen wall details. This condition has been met, and the sheet A103 includes the concealment of the equipment. There's going to be a building parapet and screen walls around it, so the rooftop mechanical will not be visible. The seventh is the notation of a specific watering schedule for plantings on the berm along the site's Michigan Avenue frontage. There has been additional detail there in terms of the watering. Sheet L11 states that if the rainwater is insufficient, the plants will be hand watered. And that's for those areas outside of the irrigation that aren't going to be normally watered unless there's something like drought conditions. And also, the zoning ordinance would require the replacement of any tree. So if there is a drought condition and some of the trees die, the applicants would have to replace them in accordance with the site plan. So under number 7, we're satisfied with the watering schedule. Under number 8, the details of the proposed decorative fence at the main entrance drive. This is something that can be met. The plans state that there's a decorative fence and there's a detail and exhibit. The applicant just had to clarify the intended screen fence at the access drive. There's a decorative stockade fence that's illustrated on the plans. So if that solid metal stockade fence is in fact that screen fence, then that would meet that criteria. Under number 9, the details of proposed trash enclosure to be constructed of masonry. This is an item that can be met. The masonry is included as part of the dumpster, and that meets the zoning ordinance. The only item that we have here is that the proposed bollards should also be on the outside of the protected gates so that any truck backing up won't damage them. I think the applicant has acknowledged this in their letter, so that condition can be met. The 10th is that the reduction in the light pole height comply with the maximum permitted height of 35 feet from grade. There's only one light pole that exceeds that height, and that's a light pole where the fixture itself meets the maximum height of 35 feet. But there's a pole, extended pole and a camera that goes 3 feet 4 inches, or between 3 and 4 feet over it. There wasn't anything specific in the ordinance that addresses any structures in terms of a height that goes over 35 feet. There are some exceptions for building heights. If there's equipment on tops of buildings, sometimes that equipment can exceed the max height of 35 feet, but there wasn't anything specific in the lighting standard or any other standard that we could find. So as of now, our recommendation would be that the light pole be lowered so that the top of the structure, including the camera, does not exceed 35 feet in height. Absent of that would be anything in the ordinance that may allow for a modification, but that's not anything that we were able to find. Under number 11, the details of the proposed ground-mounted signage to determine compliance with the zoning ordinance. And again, as we previously noted in another of the conditions with the signage, this is something that can be met administratively just so long as the applicant acknowledges compliance with the zoning ordinance. And then finally, there are 2 items that I want to bring up under number 12 in our letter on the bottom of page 3. The first one is for the chillers and the prefabricated cold soak chamber. These are proposed behind the building and within the perimeter of the berm and the green belt. And because these 2 chillers and the prefabricated cold soak chamber are behind the building and within the evergreen berm enclosure, we recommend that they be approved as proposed, provided that the architectural details of the chillers are included on the plans and that they meet the zoning ordinance requirements for height. So as long as they don't exceed the height requirements, the green belt should sufficiently screen them. And then finally, for the front yard fence, this is not something that came up in a lot of detail at preliminary, but when we looked at the fence regulations again, it does impact some of the design of the frontage fence. Section 7.205B4 of the ordinance requires that any fence located in a front yard must be ornamental or decorative, and it specifically excludes chain link or other non-decorative fence in a front yard. We did speak to the applicants about this a few weeks ago, and the plans have been changed so that now there's a 6-foot-high black aluminum fence proposed along the frontage of Michigan Avenue. The only area along Michigan Avenue that excludes that fence is east of the driveway. East of the frontage driveway, there is vinyl-coated chain link fence proposed going east of the front parking lot to the northeast lot line. Our recommendation here is that the vinyl-coated chain link fence in that area along the Michigan Avenue frontage be replaced with the 6-foot-high black aluminum fence, which would fully comply with section 7.205B4. That would have the whole frontage as the decorative fence, and then anything on the east side could be vinyl-coated chain link, as well as anything on the south side could be vinyl-coated chain link, because that would technically be in the rear. So our recommendation for the final site plan is approval subject to, there's 9 different conditions, some of which are carried forward from preliminary site plan review, but they're relatively minor based on the acknowledgments of the applicant and some of the changes on the plans. Going through as quickly as I can the conditions. The first, that the pavement markings be included on the plans. Second, that the applicant clarify the details of the proposed gate, which must meet the zoning ordinance. Third, that the signage be reviewed administratively and comply with the zoning ordinance. Fourth, that the sidewalk meet the requirement of the zoning ordinance and be included in a development agreement, including a provision that the township may require the applicant to construct the required sidewalk along Michigan Avenue at such time when the township installs or causes to install its portion of sidewalk on the adjacent property to the east. We also recommend that a note be added to the plans that the township reserves the right to require the construction of the sidewalk along the Michigan Avenue frontage, even though a future sidewalk is not illustrated west of the driveway. And finally, with that one, we recommend that the development agreement be reviewed and approved administratively, subject to approval by the township attorney. The fifth condition is that the applicant clarify if the decorative fence is the intended screen fence at the main access drive. I think that's a clarification note in terms of whether that's the solid metal stockade fence. The sixth condition is that the bollards be included in front of the dumpster. Seventh, that any light pole be lowered so that the top of the structure does not exceed 35 feet in height. Eight, that the screening of the 2 chillers and prefabricated cold soak chamber be approved as submitted on the plan. And then finally, 9, that the vinyl coated chain link fence from the east of the parking lot to the northeast corner of the detention pond be replaced with 6-foot-high black aluminum fence, which will comply with section 7.205B4 of the zoning ordinance. That concludes our report, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks so much, Mr. Sloan. I think we'll go to Fishbeck's recommendation with Mr. Potter, and then we'll see if there are any questions.
Thank you. Good evening. To begin, we also recommend the preliminary plans during the September 26th Planning Commission meeting. This review pertaining to the engineering plan review and the final site plan, our letter dated November 9th. we are recommending to Planning Commission approval for the engineering plan and the final site plan tonight. There are several comments that we made in our letter, and just for the record, they did respond. Was that today or late yesterday, I think? It's dated November 14th. So we did get a response to these. We reviewed those late today. Actually, we got them this afternoon, right? And everything seems to be in order. So just in a nutshell, in the water system, they will be extending a 12-inch across the site, basically from the east side all the way across west and under Michigan and tie-in. So they have a 12-inch water main. We did have a discussion yesterday about reconfiguring a few of the valves, just so that in the future, they'll have the ability to, they have two fire hydrants extending on each side of the building. There is a proposal probably to expand the building in the future, and by relocating these valves gives them the options to maintain water service to the building in case either side goes down. And then in the future, depending on where that building is put, most likely that water main will then be required to be looped at that time. And I think we're all in concurrence with that. The sanitary sewer is an extension of an on-site sanitary sewer that is a public sanitary sewer. And then so their extension will remain as a private sanitary sewer. We asked for a couple of revisions there to extend the ending manhole further to the west, and then to tie in their sanitary lead via a Y into the system there. And so all the other comments for water and sewer are minor detail, just nomenclature and labeling. And so the last item that we reviewed was really the storm system. They did get the county drain vacated, and there's a wetland kind of to the north in the middle of the property that stormwater is going to be flowing into. It's going to be then picked up by an on-site storm system, and that'll be directed to the east side of the property and discharge into a detention basin. We've got a 100-year storage volume in there, and we've had a discussion regarding what we did ask for is that they label the existing overland flow route pre-development. Where's the water flowing now? Because it's so flat out there, and where the county drain was. And then post-development in the detention basin, we've asked for that they include some type of a weir outlet that eventually this basin is going to fill up and it overflow, and we just want it to flow where it's always gone. Okay. Now Wayne County, they had it on there at one point. Wayne County asked them to remove it. We're asking them to put it back. So when we get into the final revision of these plans, they'll be submitting a set of plans that will be issued for construction before a pre-construction meeting is scheduled to make sure that they're complying with all these final comments. And so we're confident we can move ahead with this, and we'll be happy to answer any other questions that you may have.
Great, thank you very much. I'll also note that we do have a fire marshal review from Fire Marshal McAnally, and he has crossed through all of his preliminary comments and says plans are approved. So questions or comments for the applicant, for engineers, for planners? Anyone? Commission?
Yes.
Commissioner John.
With regard to point 7, the light pole being lowered, I'm not sure which light pole that is. It doesn't have any effect on the photometrics of the site plan, right? If you lower the light pole, we still have adequate lighting?
Yeah, I think that pole itself, I think, is more than 300 feet from the road, so on the site, and it probably won't affect anything off-site either.
Okay, thank you. That's my only question.
Anyone else, Commission? Anyone in the audience, questions or comments? Oop. Sorry, let me see. Anyone in the audience, questions or comments at this time on this agenda item? All right, Commissioner Boyden.
Okay, question is for either McKenna or staff, but on the McKenna point number 4, why are we going into, or what is the driver for a proposed agreement for a requirement of the ordinance? Whichever.
That's the sidewalk? So section 9.107 of the zoning ordinance requires that a sidewalk be constructed along the frontage of a property when it's developed. And there may also be some general ordinance language as well, but this is a zoning ordinance requirement. The applicant has worked with MDOT with some of the permits and had been working with MDOT the last time that we spoke about it to see if MDOT would even allow a sidewalk in the right-of-way. There were also concerns from the applicant of whether the sidewalk going all the way to the west, which would terminate near the railroad, whether that would be something that is feasible or even desired. And so this was one way of deferring the requirement for section 9.107, where they wouldn't have to build the sidewalk as part of this development. The township would reserve the right to require the paving of that sidewalk and the installation. And we could still uphold the requirement of that section. The only other way to kind of get around that, if they wanted relief from the requirement altogether, would be to apply for a variance from this requirement of the zoning ordinance. That's also an option that's available to them, but in our discussions with them, we felt that something of a development agreement where they do comply when the township initiates it, but that it not be waived, but it also not be required as part of this initial development.
Okay, so the quotient in there is MDOT and the easement.
Yeah.
Okay,
As Michigan Avenue
Okay.
Goes to the west, it turns into a freeway.
Mhm.
And that area, frankly, would be very difficult because of the way the freeway goes down to be able to put a sidewalk to the west.
okay, I'm good.
Okay.
And I guess just to make a statement, I didn't know, I wanted to know a little bit of the background. I didn't, and I know we don't normally do this, but, and I have every confidence in Patrick. I know we don't start making proposals for stuff that folks think that they just don't need to do for whatever reason, but like I said, I'm good.
Just one last item I wanted to bring up.
Mhm.
With the way pedestrians would enter the site.
Yep,
The only direction they realistically would enter the site would be from towards where Michigan Avenue and Denton intersect.
the east
And
side, yeah.
As the cemetery is owned by the township and it's the immediately adjacent property, we would still, through that development agreement, retain the ability to control sidewalk being installed, you know, with the spirit and intent of our ordinance. It's just, you know, there wouldn't be a sidewalk leading to that site unless we did it first. So that's why the agreement makes sense.
I'm good.
Commissioner Jordan.
Thank you. If the development agreement can't pass through legal for whatever reason, then the next recourse would be a zoning variance?
Yes.
And would that issue come to us for review before going to the ZBA or the BZA?
It would have to come before the planning commission to comment on it before it went to BZA. However, you know, just to assure you that I've been working with the township's legal counsel on what this agreement is going to look like, and we're both fairly confident we have a pretty good idea of where we're at.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions or comments? Mr. Tressel, anything that you heard tonight that sounds, okay.
The light pole with the TV camera on top is for the cantilever gate for control to the back controlled area. And we would like to keep that at 35 feet because it is 380 feet off of the road. And we have light poles around it, and then we're going to have a shorter pole adjacent to that proximity. So we would like to be able to just mount it so it's got 360-degree turning capability and zoom in, zoom out, and that type of stuff on the top of the 35-foot pole. The fence that you talked about in the front yard setback, we have added a decorative aluminum fence west of the driveway, and we have the solid fence to the northeast corner of the building and a little beyond. The fence from there easterly is actually behind Mr. Smith's former house and the farmhouse and that. It's not along the frontage. It's anywhere from 200 to 300 feet off of the frontage, and immediately it joins up with the retention pond fence that is also black vinyl coated. okay? And it's really not visible for people going down Michigan Avenue to see whether that's an aluminum fence or a chain link fence. The fence along the south side of the property line is adjacent to the railroad. And I think that our plans currently are still showing a 6-foot galvanized chain link fence. And we feel that's adequate, and we would ask for your consideration on that. The remainder of the items we've reviewed. I will speak to the sidewalk. We did have a lengthy conversation with MDOT. And MDOT said west of the driveway, they really don't want us installing a sidewalk because it goes nowhere and then many other problems. And the only place that they would consider the permit would be from the driveway east, as Ron has said. And then they really, because it's a 55-mile-an-hour road and it's on a inside curve, they really don't have any strong feeling one way or the other from their east, but the crossing would have to be at the traffic light. They don't want people going west and trying to go into the railroad grade and that kind of stuff. So with those, I think that's the only issues that we still have to solve, other than some cleanup labeling and stuff. And we're prepared to move forward with that if we have an affirmative action tonight.
Thank you very much. So let's talk a little bit on the light pole. Let me ask a question. Is the 3 to 4 feet that we're hearing in the review what you're asking for in addition to the 35 feet? Do I understand that?
Yeah, it's mounted on top of the light pole, so it's not blinded by other poles or other lights around it. And it's made to see the drivers coming up to the gate. It's allowed to let security have people pass into the secure area. And we would like to keep that. It may not be 3 or 4 feet. It's the model that Subaru is picking for that TV camera. And we know it'll fit in that range or lower.
Okay. Mr. Sloan, do you have anything?
The camera specifically being mounted on a pole like that, the ordinance is silent on that. So when it's silent on something, we have to defer to the other standards of the zoning ordinance. And the height above the 35, it would exceed the height of the light pole. Now, if the top of the camera were 35, we could call it accessory to the light pole, and I think it would meet that. Beyond that, if we look at the height of accessory structures, that's higher than an accessory structure height. I think it may even be higher than the principal structure height. So there's no part of the zoning ordinance that states that the camera can exceed the height of 35 feet on the light pole. From a planning standpoint, I don't have an objection to it. I think if they were to apply for a variance for it, I think they'd have a very good chance, just because of it's one camera on one pole and it's for the security of the site. But I just don't see anything in the ordinance that states that it's a permitted extension onto the light pole.
What if it was on a building and it was either a security camera or possible a wireless communication added to the top of the building? What does the ordinance say about that?
There are many things that you can do on a building, like cameras and things that go above the height of the building. Sometimes mechanical equipment, antennas, different things that customarily go on top of a building, flagpoles. So there's a lot of leeway if something is on top of a building itself. I just couldn't find anything for a light pole.
And this is a light pole because of its location in relation to the gate and then the building.
It is.
There's no other structure in that area that would make sense to house the security camera.
There is not, and again, as the camera works, it has to have vision, at night as well as during the day. And if we bring that down so that is equal to the top of the light pole, then the glare from the fixtures is going to cause problems with the TV. So.
What do you guys think?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ed?
I feel like with the light pole extension being camera and it's security related, I'm okay with the extension of it. And I'm hoping that the applicant wouldn't have to go in front of the BZA for approval if we could come to consensus on it. It's one pole that's 3 to 4 feet higher, it's for security purposes. It needs to be that high to ensure that the light doesn't affect it, because it's sensing motion, I'm assuming, too.
Well, the actual camera is being selected yet, but it has a vision path, and the vision path can't be blinded by the light fixture.
So it needs to be higher.
It needs to be higher than the fixture.
That's I'm okay with it.
Through the chair, I don't have a problem with it. I don't think it's that big of a unit that it's gonna stand out, and I don't see it being a problem.
How many feet is the light fixture away from the property line?
About 380 feet.
Yeah, I really don't have a problem with it.
Right. Not necessarily in its effect to this application, but are we setting any kind of a precedent that we are not going to be willing to agree with as we go forward? Because the only correction to that would be to amend the ordinance, which I'd rather not have to do.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty narrow use where it's one camera on one site, several hundred feet from the road. It's above the lighting there. I think long-term, an ordinance amendment may be a good idea, because this is probably not the only time it'll come up with all the industrial property in the township. And we do encourage the light poles at 35 feet only because you have fewer light poles, they can get more light, and we have the full cutoff requirements and the buffering from neighboring residences. So if industrial properties are building poles at 35 feet, inevitably they're going to want to locate some cameras there. So this may be something that we address in a future ordinance amendment. As much as we don't always want to amend the ordinance, this is something that could be a recurring item.
Okay.
Through the chair.
Sure. Commissioner
A
Ashton.
follow-up question, sir. With the camera, you said it hasn't been selected yet. When it is deciding to record, or it's recording continuously, is it putting out any kind of light that could be distracting to the neighbors?
No.
No,
We're
there's no-
probably, it's on the far side from the neighbors, okay? And we have the 400-foot buffer, and then we have the building, and then we have the light pole. So we are probably 800 feet from the neighbors to the east. And it's not putting out a light, okay?
So there's nothing blinking or airport
No.
of interest? Okay.
And the pole is 35 feet high. We're talking about equipment mounted on the pole.
Correct.
The pole is 35 feet high, okay? So just so that's clear.
Mr. Akers, anything?
Not at this time.
Okay. All right, so it seems like we might be able to work it out for the light pole and the extension for security. Where are commissioners at in the thought about the fencing request?
You know, we've looked at that before when Bayloff had the same thing. It was a fence by and I don't see it being that big a problem for as far away as it is. We've done that before. I don't have a problem changing that. The fence that goes on the south side by the railroad track.
Anyone else?
I think the applicant has demonstrated a concern with the aesthetics of the site, and I do not have a problem with the fence proposed by the applicant.
Just for commentary, I'm good with everything.
Okay, good. We like it when you're good with everything.
And our comment on the fence is, the applicant had mentioned on the south side of having the fence there. And we're okay with the vinyl coated fence as proposed on the south side and on the east side. Our concern here was along the frontage of Michigan Ave from that northeast corner of the parking lot to the northeast corner of the lot itself where there's Michigan Avenue frontage. That was the area where we were concerned about changing that from chain link to the aluminum. The rest of the lot lines we were okay with.
Right. But, and the fencing that you're talking about is the fencing that is a couple hundred feet back from the road frontage? Is that correct?
Well, I don't know how far exactly that northern fence is. If we go from the northeast part of the parking lot to the northeast lot line, along the Michigan Avenue frontage, I don't know offhand how far that is from the road right away. I can take a quick look at the plans here and see if I can get a distance.
You probably.
Just
Carla's
as a
looking
point of
too.
clarification, if I can through the chair, there's the fence that's going to be behind Mr. Smith's two homes in the barn and then there's the fence along the south property line. And the south property line on our plans is clearly labeled a 6-foot galvanized chain link fence. It's not black vinyl coated, it's along a railroad track. The neighbor to the south is the Rasser landfill and the General Motors parts plant. So for us to put a black vinyl fence that nobody will ever see back there seems like additional expense that we would prefer not to spend.
Well, just to be clear, we're talking about the south side, the railroad. We have no issues with that fence.
Correct.
They're proposing a 6-foot high black vinyl coated chain link fence.
No,
They're
not black vinyl.
It's galvanized.
Only galvanized.
Okay, but they have black, the plan says 6-foot high black vinyl coated chain link on the south side.
You must have an older version of plans. Melissa, what does our plan say? What sheet number?
We'll just take a minute and make sure that we all are in agreement. What page number are you on?
Okay, so the plans that I'm looking at are dated October 26, 2018. For example, sheet C03.
Six-foot high, black vinyl coated chain link fence, 1 foot off the property line.
Along the railroad?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's in here, done by us.
See it? And cell distance?
If you look on L6,
L6.
which is where the fence is
Landscaping
mostly called out. And L7, it shows it as a galvanized.
It shows the south side is galvanized, and L7?
L6 and L7.
Okay. Okay.
So on the landscaping plans, it shows galvanized.
Yeah, we just screwed up.
Okay.
On the 148,000 pages that you gave us?
Very detailed.
Okay, I can go with that.
All right. And do we have an approximate distance off of Michigan Avenue for the northeast?
Scale.
yet?
Sure, we'll give you that, just a sec here. This is 40 scale. So we're talking about. Okay,
Here. Black vinyl coated here.
at the closest point, it's 160 feet, and that's right just west of the barn, and just in front of the 10-foot berm, at its closest point. From the roadway, it's about 240 feet.
So, Mr. Sloan, the request is for just galvanized on the south side to agree with the landscape sheet plan and the black coated, vinyl coated at the northeast corner of the property, which is along Michigan Avenue, but not exactly frontage. Am I correct?
Take a look at the northeast side here. And the northeast side is unusual because there's a notch.
Right.
For the house itself. The notch itself, there's some fencing that goes behind it that's a northward facing fence on the very north side of the detention pond. When we get farther east of that lot, that's in front of the detention pond, then it's something that is between the road and the detention pond itself. For the fencing, this would be regulated by section 7.205 B4, and it requires that, at the very end of the section, that fences that are located in the rear can, at the discretion of the Planning Commission, be non-decorative, provided they're not directly visible from the public right-of-way. So this section doesn't necessarily say that it has to be vinyl-coated chain link. So on that south side, we can accept a galvanized fence at the discretion of the Planning Commission. So that's something that's within the purview, and we don't have any objection to that being galvanized. As long as the sheets are consistent, it does meet the zoning ordinance requirements. In that same paragraph, though, earlier, it states that fences and walls in all non-residential districts shall be of an ornamental or decorative material such as rod and rail, stockade, or brick. However, it can't be more than 8 feet high. And in the definitions of the ordinance, there's a definition for ornamental and decorative fence, and that definition explicitly excludes chain link. So in the plan itself, because that fence is technically in the front, the ordinance would require it to be that aluminum fence or some decorative fence from the east side of the parking lot up until just past that gate to the detention pond on that west side, because that would technically be the front, and anything farther west would be considered behind the front of the building. I think we would consider that rear. But at the very least, to meet the standard of the zoning ordinance, it would have to go up to that, I'd call it the northwest corner of the detention pond fencing, just north of that gate.
Yeah, I don't think putting it that far is an issue. It's about 200 feet off the road, but if that's what satisfies everybody, that's fine. It's not that
It
much.
definitely keeps us within the ordinance.
Yeah.
So, which is our comfort zone, of course.
Mhm.
All right. Anything else outstanding on either side, application or our side, that we've not resolved tonight? We're good on engineering. We've got a lot of administrative approvals coming down the pike. Director Akers, good with it, okay?
Take care of it.
All right. Anything from the audience? If the planning commission is ready to take action, the motion will need to call out what we've approved tonight as well as the letters of recommendation. Is there a motion? Commissioner John.
Commissioner Boyden?
We've been chiding each other all night long. Don't pay no attention to us. Madam Chair.
Commissioner Boyd, let's hear your motion. We'll all weigh in.
I move that the applicant, ACS Michigan, Subaru Research and Development, be granted Phase 2 final site plan approval per the approved development agreement to construct an automotive research and development facility at 515 Michigan Avenue, also otherwise known as the Harold Smith Farm. Pursuant to the letters from McKenna dated November 9th, recommendations of the McKenna letter dated November 9th of 2018 to include Planning Commission discretionary approval of the galvanized fence in the rear and the implementation of the decorative fence from, help me on this, from the east to the, where does it terminate from? From the east to the,
From the east side of the parking lot to the northwest corner of the detention pond fence, just north of that gate.
got that, Madam Secretary?
Got it.
The letter from our engineering professionals, Fishbeck, Thompson, Carr, and Huber.
I'm sorry. We need to do the light pole on the mechanic.
Oh, and the light pole, oh yeah, the light pole with the camera also. I don't know what number that one is under.
Number 10.
Number 10, okay. There is no number 10.
Recommendation number 7.
Thank you
of the
very much.
McKenna letter.
Okay, that one also. Now to Fishbeck, Thompson, Carr, and Huber. Their recommendations, so noted in the November 9th letter of 2018, and also from Dave McAnally, our most illustrious fire marshal, in his letter of approval dated November 1st of 2018.
Excellent. Is there support for the motion?
I support the motion.
Commissioner Jarman, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? You have your final site plan approval with a lot of homework still left, but you guys have really worked very, very hard and diligently through
Good proposal.
these last months, so congratulations.
I'd like to thank the consultants and Ron and everybody. I mean, this has been a very expedited project, and you can see why with the weather and the way it's turning and what we're trying to do. And so we do appreciate all of the commission's efforts, the board, and the consultants.
Thank you, Mr. Treadwell. We too appreciate how wonderful our staff and our professionals are. Thank you. All right, moving on to tonight's agenda, item number 2 is a preliminary site plan approval. The applicant, Kajoyan Van Buren Acquisitions, or NEPCO, is requesting preliminary site plan approval to construct a 72,630 square foot light industrial building. The parcel number is V12583-0029-0026-706. That is 6615 Haggerty Road. The site is approximately 5.3 acres and is located on the east side of Haggerty Road between Van Born Road and Ecorse Road. And we'll start with a presentation by the applicant, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tony Antone. I'm with the Kajoyan Companies. And I wanted to also thank Ron and Mrs. Budd and the other folks who helped us through this process. We are the owners of approximately 1.2 million square feet in Van Buren Township. So we own the Van Buren Business Center, which is on Haggerty, south of Ecorse, where Piston Automotive and HP Products, that build, those two buildings over there. And then also the Interchange West buildings, most of you know it as the Blue Stripe buildings on the freeway. That's about, 700,000 square feet there. So this development that we're proposing is, like you said, about 72,000 square feet on Haggerty Road. It is adjacent to our Interchange West Business Center. And it was, we sort of bought those houses over time to clean things up. And as our largest tenant at Interchange, Neapco, started to, grow a little bit too big and ran out of space, they approached us and said, do you have anything else? And as most people know, in the industrial market, there's not much out there. So we were able to put together a plan which would allow them to have access from their current driveway into this building. I think it's going to work out very well for them, allow them to stay in the township long-term, as opposed to trying to go find a place that'll be, have to go all under one roof. This will be a good spot to sort of bridge that gap. And on our team here, I've got Jim Butler, our engineer, Chip Fowdy, our architect, and Steve Shimke from our construction company, Cunningham Limb. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim to go into the details of the project.
Great, thank you very much.
Good evening. Jim Butler with PEA, with the civil engineering consultant for the project. As Mr. Antone had mentioned, this is a 72,000 square foot building. It is located on approximately 5 acres, located on the east side of Haggerty Road. I forgot my easel this evening, so I'm using a temporary chair here as my easel. That parcel is demarcated in red. Again, it's 5 acres, zoned M1. Just to keep everything in its proper orientation, I rotated the plan for you.
Thank you.
This plan, it provides for 105 parking spaces located on the north, the south, and the east side of the building. We're providing a detention basin on the south side, which will meet the requirements of not only your township's engineering standards, but that of Wayne County. Ultimately, we do need to get a permit from them. There are 2 points of access from Haggerty Road, one located on the north side of the building, one located on the south side of the building. As Mr. Antone pointed out, there's a tenant that's in their existing building, would be utilizing this building. So we have also added 2 cross connections for access for drive instead of somebody having to go back out on Haggerty Road. They can come and use these as cross connections. That was also a benefit to the fire department. We did have a good discussion with them about access, and they were very pleased to have this secondary accesses. Regarding the landscaping, we do meet the requirements of the township's ordinance. One modification that we are requesting is a landscape. There's a requirement for a 10-foot side yard or a landscape buffer. And I think that's in section 10.103A. Right now, there is a 30-foot strip between our property line and the existing buildings to the east. It's about a 5-foot high berm and has landscaping on it. We can't meet the requirement for the 10-foot on our property. So this, we would like to have it modified, have a modification approved. We won't touch the berm, it'll still act as a berm. So we think that does meet the intent of what the ordinance has required. We have reviewed the letters provided by your planning consultant of November the 8th by McKenna and the letters from FTC&H of November the 9th. We have no issue with them. We think we can meet those conditions. So if you should have any questions of me, Mr. Antone, the architect, the contractor, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Great, thanks very much.
Thank you.
We'll hear our recommendations and then see what the discussion leads to from there. We'll start with McKenna first, please, Mr. Sloan.
Thank you. I'll read from our letter of November 8th. The applicant had gone over most of the details about the project description, so I'll just move into some of our specific comments. For the zoning and the use, the site is zoned M1 Light Industrial District, and the light manufacturing and processing uses are permitted by right. So this is just here for site plan review. There's no special land use review that we're aware of that is required because the use is permitted. The applicant also states that there's no machining or milling of components. For the lot itself, there are 5 different parcels, 5 different tax identification numbers, and our only comment there is that if the site plan is approved, that the parcels be combined into a single tax ID number. For the dimensional requirements, the site meets all of the required setbacks for the front yard of 50 feet and the side and rear yard of 40 feet. The parking is located 11.5 feet from the northern side lot line. The ordinance does permit a parking lot to be located in a required side yard setback, so any parking that's in a setback is permitted. With regard to the green belt, we'll get into that in a few moments. Under number 5 of our letter of access and the circulation, the site plan proposes 4 curb cuts. 2 are from Haggerty Road, and the other 2 are to the adjacent property to the east to have cross access. Both on Haggerty are designed with a width of 30 feet. and the southeast and northeast access drives are 24 feet wide. Our only recommendations there are, first, that the lanes of ingress and egress be striped on the pavement, and second, that a copy of the agreement must be submitted for review. That's the access agreement between the two adjacent lots. They're fairly straightforward, and so we think that's pretty attainable. For the sidewalks, the site plan indicates that there will be a 5-foot wide concrete sidewalk along the site's Haggerty Road frontage, which will connect to the existing sidewalks on the north and south sides. There will also be sidewalks from the public right-of-way sidewalks to the interior and around the building. Under number 6, the parking and loading, all of the parking spaces are dimensioned at 9.5 feet wide by 18 feet long. The spaces overhang an 8-foot wide sidewalk on the north side of the building and also overhang a 12-foot wide green belt along the north property line. Those meet the zoning ordinance in terms of the dimensions and the allowable overhang. The aisles are also 24 feet wide as required. The ordinance requires that all parking spaces be clearly striped with 4-inch wide double lines, spaced 24 inches apart. And we just recommend that those lines be shown on revised plans as a condition of approval, just so that they're illustrated. In terms of the number of spaces, the total requirement based on the use itself is 105 spaces when we calculate the industrial use in the office. The parking required for the light industrial is 83 spaces and an additional 22 spaces for the warehouse use. So there's a proposed number of spaces of 105, which meets the ordinance requirement exactly. There's also sufficient number of barrier-free spaces and loading spaces as well. For the landscaping and screening, the requirements are met for the frontage landscaping, the parking lot landscaping, both the interior and the perimeter, for the loading area, and for the other requirements. The item that we note here for the greenbelt buffering that the applicant also brought up was that the trees that are being counted toward the buffering requirement are located outside of the applicant's property line. Also, the buffer on the east side is 2.28 feet. So the Planning Commission has discretion to modify the setback and the screening standards by determining if the existing and proposed screening is adequate or needs to be substituted with additional plantings. We recommend that the modification be approved as proposed on the plan. They are industrial neighbors, so sometimes there can be flexibility there that's easy to justify, especially when they're two adjacent like uses. And then the final comment under landscaping is that the proposed plan would have to be submitted to Wayne County for its approval for any landscaping around the detention pond area. Under the tree removal permit, there are 13 deciduous trees and 12 evergreen trees proposed. The evergreen trees are 8 feet instead of the required height of 6 feet, and each 8-foot high evergreen counts as 1.5 replacement trees. So based on that criteria, those 12 evergreens count as 18 replacement trees. So the number of trees based on their size do meet the tree replacement requirements of the ordinance. Under the lighting, the plan includes the site lighting plan. The proposed pole height is 25 feet from the grade to the top of the fixture and meets the ordinance standards. The photometrics also meet the standards in terms of the illumination on the site and controlling any off-site illumination. For the architecture and building details, we have elevations and an artistic rendering for the proposed building that's proposed. The building will be constructed of concrete panels in 3 different colors. The main body of the building will be a light beige panel, and the northwest, southwest corner and middle will have darker brown panels with an accent band in blue across the entire facade. There are some jogs in the facade as well as some windows to try to break up the wall of the facade and kind of the monotony sometimes you get of just a single blank wall. So we think that the architecture there is adequate and is consistent with other architecture in the industrial district. The last couple comments are about the dumpster and the signage. The dumpster is shown and the enclosure meets the requirements of the ordinance. And the signs for both the wall sign and the monument sign If those designs and dimensions are known, we recommend that they be added to the plan, but we have some dimensions that are in our letter here that are the maximums allowed, so the applicant will be aware of those requirements. So in conclusion, our recommendation for the site plan is approval with the following 8 conditions. First, that the parcels be combined into a single tax ID number. Second, that the lanes of ingress and egress be striped. Third, that the cross-access easement be submitted for review. Fourth, that the double-stripe parking lines be shown on the plans. Fifth, that the Planning Commission approve a modification to the Greenbelt standards of Section 10.103A to allow the existing trees along the east and north property lines to meet this requirement. Sixth, the location of any mechanical equipment for operation of the pond must be noted on the plan with screening. Seventh, if the wall sign is known by the applicant, we recommend that it be added to the plans. And finally, 8, if the design of the monument sign is known, we recommend that it be added to the plans also. So with that, we will be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. That's all right, we'll go ahead to Mr. Potter and Fishbeck's recommendation.
Thank you. Good evening once again. Our letter is dated November 9th. This is for preliminary plan review. The review is relative to, does the applicant show feasibility to move forward to engineering and final site plan? So we do recommend moving forward with this. We recommend approval for the preliminary plan. I will give you a few of the comments here. Relative to the water system, there's an existing 12-inch water main that they're going to be connecting an 8-inch to, so it shows feasibility, availability. We are going to ask that they add an additional valve so that their service connections can be serviced in the future without too much trouble as far as isolation. Under sanitary sewer, there's an existing 21-inch reinforced concrete pipe that they're going to be connecting to a 10-inch. We're just asking that the RUs be shown on the plans, calculation for the base of design, and that they label their tap as a Y, and that they show the cleanouts on the drawings. The stormwater system will be ultimately discharging to the Bell Drain, which is north of the site, which is a Wayne County drain. We did review the soil boring, showing there's no groundwater in the proposed basin at that location. One of the items that they are proposing is a water quality pretreatment. This particular model is a Vortex 11,000 prior to discharging into the proposed new on-site detention on the south side. And then that will be discharged into a county drain system that ends up in the drain. One comment there is that the maximum release was shown as 0.15 CFS for the 100-year, which meets Wayne County's. The townships is 0.1 CFS, so calculations have to be revised to show that discharge. I believe we did a preliminary review, and it looks like the volume's there, so shouldn't be a large revision. With that being said, again, we do recommend preliminary site plan approval.
Great, thanks so much. And we have the fire marshal review. Pretty normal stuff. Commissioner Boynton, you want to run down the list?
From Dave C. McAnally, the second fire marshal for Van Buren Township, I have reviewed a set of plans drawn by Cunningham Limp of 28970 Cabot Drive, Suite 100, Novi, Michigan. These were received on November 5th of 2018 for the above referred project, Neapco development. All NFPA guidelines adopted by the Township of Van Buren were used in referencing this project. The overview, the submitted preliminary site plans are for new construction of a 72,630-foot warehouse. One, the fire department connection will be a 4-inch Storts with a 30-degree downturn, adding fire lane to west side of building to allow for FDC to stay where proposed. Number 2, a red sign with white lettering saying FDC, and below that 150 PSI will be mounted 8 feet above the FDC. Number 3, Knox boxes will be mounted at the entrance of every suite at all fire pump rooms. Knox box can be, it gives description where the Knox box can be ordered. Do not mount until location has been verified with the fire marshal. A 2-way radio communication enhancement systems are required for all new constructions. Unless after finished construction, the occupant can prove through a signal test with the AHJ that it is not needed. NFPA code in all new existing buildings, minimum radio strength for fire department communication shall be maintained at a level determined by the AHJ, and he has attached requirements for this regulation by the state of Michigan. Fire hydrants shall be marked with an approved flag where required by the fire department. Fire hydrant on Northwest Drive will be moved closer to the building and FDC, but no further off driveway, per phone conversation with the architect. With information provided, I can approve, with exceptions, the progression of the project with the site plan submitted. The fire department requires involvement in the continuing plan review, inspection, and certificate of occupancy process, and will require various inspections during the construction phases and immediately prior to opening to verify compliance with the appropriate codes. 1 set of as-built construction drawings, schedules, and details as it relates to construction, fire protection, and response will be required, as well as a digital CAD layout of the building by this department prior to our final C of O inspection. Review and approval by the authority having jurisdiction shall not relieve the applicant of the responsibility of compliance with these codes. Respectfully submitted, David McAnally, Van Buren Department, Fire Department, Fire Marshal.
Thank you. So, pretty normal stuff. Moving a fire hydrant, but good to have that extra access. That is good. Questions or comments from the commission for the applicant, or staff, or engineer planners? Commissioner Jar?
I do have a question regarding the greenbelt buffering. I do understand the adjacent light uses in this instance. Having that greenbelt area between the buildings doesn't seem like it's providing, screening is adequate, is what it looks like. But the greenbelt ordinance is also an environmental one, requiring trees to be planted in the greenbelt area. So my question is, since the trees that were being counted were not on the applicant's property, how many trees would need to be on the applicant's property to meet the requirement of the greenbelt buffering?
It's a ratio of 1 tree per 30 feet. So typically they'll take the length, and if they don't do it uniform, they might do them in groupings to meet that average. But it's 1 to 30 feet.
How long is the parcel?
We have to take a look at that to measure it. On the north side, it looks like it's 230 feet. And
Probably about 650.
on the east, or on the north?
So I suppose my question is actually how many additional plantings would be required to meet that greenbelt requirement?
If it were on the north, we would be looking at 8 trees. And then if it's on the east, So the eastern lot line, how long is that lot line approximately?
All the way down to the full length, 970 feet.
Okay.
I take it all the way to the south drive.
It's approximately 28 trees short. Is that correct?
So we're at
On their property.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, if they were to have the required green belt, if we did not waive it, it would require 28 more trees, correct? Roughly, within 5 or 10?
Yeah, roughly.
Is the berm that's there now got sufficient planting, or could they be added? Do they need to be added?
But the berm's not on their property.
Correct, but if they added more trees to that berm, then would it help the requirements that we would have if we allowed them to do that?
Whose property is the berm on?
It's on the interchange property, so, I mean, still ours, but there's a lot of plantings there. If you were to go back there, you really, I mean, it's pretty dense, you know, between the two parcels, so.
And a follow-up question, the plan right now has exactly the number of trees on the landscaping plan as required by the ordinance?
That's correct.
So if you're considering not just the landscaping requirements, but also the environmental impact,
That is my concern.
right, then you're looking to increase the number of plantings? Possibly.
Possibly. Is that something that the applicant would be able to consider doing in a future revision of the plan?
Right, because we're at preliminary.
Oh, yeah, we're
now,
at
so-
preliminary, and this is, I
Right.
think this is the appropriate time to bring that concern up, isn't it?
And it could be too that we probably should drive back there because that's been there a while, so what's there is definitely grown. So it's probably filled in a lot, and it might not be a place to put anything else.
Right.
It is. I mean, we don't do this just to try to save on trees. It would be tough aesthetically to plant 28 trees on this site and not make it look, you know, just too much.
Too much like a forest?
Too much like a forest, yeah.
Like I said, I do understand
Yeah.
the adjacent like uses, and I
Yeah.
see where the green belt, where you're asking to have.
No, I appreciate where you're going with it,
that, right? I
absolutely.
just want to make sure that
Yep.
you've considered all aspects
Yeah.
of that. in the
So maybe we need to see some visuals of what exists on there now. Maybe, whether it's a drone picture or, I mean, I don't think we have to measure it and stake it out. I just think
Sure.
we need to have a better understanding
So that
of
we
what
understand.
right, the request to allow that green belt to count.
So if there's a way to do that for final, that would be very helpful, because in order for NEAPCO to get the contracts that they need, we're trying to get this off the dime and move forward, so, you know what I mean? So maybe we could do that with the contemplation of staff or something, you could word it in a way to be reasonable in that fashion?
I understand.
And it wouldn't be unusual for landscaping to be part of final,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
And we have the tree removal to approve also. All right.
Yeah, this is something that can be a condition of preliminary to be addressed at final.
A good question.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from the commission? Anyone in the audience? Well, I'm excited that you were able to come up with a solution that helps you grow and keeps good business here in the township. I think it is a creative solution. Obviously, you've put already a lot of creative thought into how to fit rectangles in small spaces. So, if there's no other questions or comments, are we ready to take action on the preliminary request? Is there a motion?
Madam Chairman, I move that we grant preliminary site plan approval to the applicant. I am very sorry, I don't know how to pronounce the applicant's.
Kajoyan.
Kajoyan, for the applicant, Kajoyan Van Buren Acquisitions, on behalf of NEAPCO, to construct a 72,000 square foot light industrial building on the parcel known as 6615 Haggerty Road, subject to the conditions in the letter from McKenna Associates dated November 8th, with the addition that the greenbelt buffering issue will be resolved before final site plan approval. Also, with regard to the comments of FTC and H letter dated November 9th, and in accordance with the exceptions called out by Fire Marshal McAnally in his letter of November 5th.
We have a motion, is there support? Support, Commissioner Budd. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, gentlemen,
Thank you so much.
moving forward, and we look forward to seeing you back here with final. We are to general discussion in tonight's agenda. Director Akers, anything for general discussion for us tonight?
Madam Chair, I have nothing for the planning commission.
Commissioners, anything for general discussion? Anyone in the audience? If there's nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Commissioner Boynton, support?
Support.
Commissioner Atchison, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and thank you, we're adjourned. Good work tonight.